Thank you so much.
I'll be downstairs.
Can you get me that pillow?
What?
Or maybe I don't need it.
Get what?
The pillow. No, this will be all right. Thank you.
Downstairs.
Got the 42 million for internal, got the 25 million for budget. Isn't that enough for the county that we can?
No, should
not
leave
do
the
the
lights off.
community?
It is. Take a
You
look
don't
at
think
that.
so?
It's good. It's mood
You
lighting.
said we're doing good.
We are doing it.
All right, let's get started, everyone. Time being 9 a.m., May 2nd, 2022. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Kane County's American Rescue Plan Committee. Clerk, please call the roll for attendance.
Bates,
Brown here. Brad's here.
Gums,
Guns here.
Kenyon,
And in here.
Leonard,
Leonard here.
Martin,
Martin here.
Molina,
Molina present.
Strathman,
Strathman present.
Pepe,
Happy here.
Sanchez.
Sanchez present. All right, we don't have minutes for this meeting today. It's a special meeting, but do we have any public comments on agenda or non-agenda items? Hearing none from online, we will move on. Program manager update, we don't have anything for that as well. Other committee matters. I know Ms. Bates, you had mentioned wanting to bring something up, but is that,
Yes.
would it be more germane to the conversation under the resolution or separate from that?
I don't know what the Robert rules on this would be, so I'll do it now.
It's simple conversational.
Okay, okay. I would like to bring up.
Make sure your microphone's on.
I would like to bring up the topic of having a second tranche. Is that how you say that word? For the community support grant. We have first of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Phillips for all the help he gave me with getting onto SharePoint. I'm feeling much more informed. And when we look at does Blair have the buckets, the bucket list
Um,
handy?
It's in the resolution.
Oh, okay,
itself.
just go down a little bit.
Yeah. if you
Blair,
just-
could you go down to the table? Thank you. Perfect. So as we look at this bucket list, a new kind of bucket list, we can see that we've reserved $25 million for the budget gaps that we might, experience from COVID. $42 million for the internal requests from the departments, which we believe is covering all of the requests, which was one of the things that we've talked about wanting to do from the beginning. $2 million in administrative costs, and then 11.3 for TBD, to be determined. I would like to discuss the future of having another tranche for the community support grants. Possibly, so we've discussed $10 million, we've discussed $5 million, or more or less in there. But I think that the will of this committee right now is that we should have a second go around for the community organizations who did so much during the COVID pandemic. I learned a new saying a couple of days ago that those who are the closest to the problem are the closest to the solution. So I believe that our nonprofits that we've already helped need more help in recovering from their expenses during the pandemic and in helping those who still have not gotten out of that hole that they were in during the pandemic. I know the economy is doing well, but not all boats aren't rising right now. So I wanted to bring that up as a discussion item. It's not in the resolution we're about to look at. Mr. Sanchez and I discussed this, whether we should make an amendment to this resolution or if we would need more time to have a resolution possibly for our next meeting in which we would decide whether or not to have another contribution and how much. So that's what, and I've called several of you. Most of you are in favor of, in fact, a majority of this committee is in favor of another contribution to our local organizations. So I wanted to start that conversation.
Mr. Frost?
Could somebody remind me, what was it? We were at was it 4.5 million on the last, the
4 million.
4 million?
Mhm.
And I've supported this thought all along. I think the 4 million was determined by the asks and requests from the various agencies. And I would support a second round of 2 million, which would be another 50% over what was originally requested, and put $2 million back into the social issues.
Mr. Martin?
I believe that, and I don't want to speak for the committee, but I think that the discussion that we had that evolved into this chart that we are now voting on this morning was to create a structure to in fact have future conversations. And excuse me, we have set estimates for our governmental shortage, for our departmental requests and administrative costs, so that we have goals to achieve in that area. And what we don't know is how much money, in fact, we will have left over when this is done. And I think that the discussion about what we ought to give to outside agencies ought to be had, but I don't want to have it in the abstract and make a decision today that will bind us on things that we, I believe, as a committee, prioritized. We want to make certain that we have the county's necessities covered. We want to make certain that we have handled our in-house requests. And we're not going to know as to whether or not those are adequate until, in fact, we've started to distribute the money and make the distributions. And so to Mavis's point about the conversation, I don't think we're precluding a conversation. I think that the TBD 11.3 was exactly to preserve the ability to have that conversation down the road once we could pinpoint better what we were actually going to be spending on the items above it. So I don't support changing this chart as it sits.
Mr. Leonard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Neither do I. With respect to Ms. Bates' request, I understand that all of these requests are worthwhile and very helpful to the community. However, I think at this point, as Mr. Martin said, we cannot allocate monies if we don't know if we're going to have that amount of money available, and preclude handling other responsibilities. You know, the departmental requests are just under $42 million. And obviously those are all needed functions that we have to take care of. And then we have the 25 million in government services, payroll reimbursement, administrative costs, and the to be determined is really the key area that I think Ms. Bates is talking about, the 11.3 million. Just three little things that I think we need to look at going forward is, number one, we do have a need in this county for salary increases for our employees. And looking at that from a kind of a conservative standpoint, if we gave across the board raises to the people in the county, that would equate to about $3.75 million. We also have $26 million in mandates that we're going to have to implement in the next 2 to 3 years. And
Was that
26 million,
in mandates?
yes.
Thank you.
So between those two, you know, we have about $30 million that we don't have allocated in any way. And part of this money, that 11.3 million, could be used towards that. My other concern is, if we give money to outside sources, are we then going to ask for a property tax increase or a sales tax increase? And Ms. Bates had mentioned that, you know, the economy is really doing well. You know, respectfully, I disagree. Inflation's at 8% right now. and we have 10 million job openings in the country. So I don't think the economy is doing great. And I think we have to take care of our employees, number one, and then also follow the state mandates before we can even consider giving money away somewhere else.
Thank you, Mr. Leonard. Ms. Gums and then Mr. Tepe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Speaking about Ms. Bates, I would support that wholeheartedly. I want to go back last year when we first started to have this discussion about where our monies were going to go. The gift that we got from the government. Never did I ever anticipate that we would end at $4 million. That was not the intent. It was discussed by this committee. I don't think there's anybody in this committee that could say we agreed that $4 million would be the end game. So no, I don't agree with that. We should be done. Secondarily, salary increases for our employees is a major issue. However, the gift from the government is not the solution for a failure of our ability to forecast that and to not address that. So in my opinion, one has nothing to do with the other. The economy and the money that we've been gifted to handle a pandemic that has affected everyone is irrelevant, in my opinion, to the failures of us to forecast the needs of our employees for years. So I fundamentally disagree with that analogy. Respectfully, Mr. Leonard. I would support $10 million going to our social services, because again, they are the ones that know how to handle this problem. I think that's all I got to say about that right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gums. Mr. Tepe,
Thank you, Chair.
comments to share.
Okay, I want to agree with Mr. Martin, as did Mr. Leonard. I think this is premature to, again, start talking about another round of funds when we don't know what is going to happen with the other funds. And until we're further along, I will not support going into the area of coming up with another round of funds for outside organizations. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Tepe. Mr. Kenyon, go ahead.
I'm thinking of, part of the deal here is the outside organizations have ways of raising their own funds. Let's just take the development department. They use what we give them. They can't go out and raise more money to pay better salaries or do anything like that. I'm not saying we don't, but you've got a problem with the cost of food, problem with the cost of housing, and mental health. And I don't know which one is the most important, but I'm thinking mental health has got to be right up there. I mean, I just would not throw money all over. I would give it to specific people later. So I agree with the other three guys that wait till after we're done.
Mr. Brown?
Yeah, I think, thank you. I think I'd like to see this resolution pass today as it is. I wouldn't want to see us try to amend it. And looking forward into further conversation, I think we should have about putting more money, more support out into the community. But let's not go too far, too fast down that road yet. As I recall, the request that we received based on the parameters that we put out there were something like $7.9 million, Mr. Chair. You could correct me if I'm wrong on that. And that was with some of them exceeding what they were allowed to request and some of them saying they wish they could request more, but they couldn't. So there's a larger need than what we're recognizing. And then I think something else that we found out through this process is there were other organizations that we unintentionally excluded from being able to request money through this program. That before we start considering another tranche of help for the community, or not before, but as we consider it, we should also consider those organizations that may have contacted us and said, but what about us? Why aren't we included in on this? So we need to make sure as we go about this second round, if we do, that we're including everyone that should be included. But I think for today, we should just pass this resolution as it is.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I do agree. I think what we're discussing right now is outside of the realm of the resolution that we're here to vote on today. But knowing that there is interest on the committee, I do think that we should discuss it at a later date. We're probably not going to have a meeting on the 11th. We might not have any need for that. We may even, and not to get anybody excited, we may even go to monthly meetings for this committee after today.
Or weekly.
possibly. We could go to weekly, yeah, but you'll be the only one here, Mike. I guarantee it. So at a future meeting, perhaps this month or next month, I'll put it on the agenda for us to discuss. I do think it's a bigger conversation than just, do we want to do another round? Because as you hinted at, do we want to do the exact same categories? Do we want to expand those categories? Do we want to expand the definitions? Do we want to look at what we have in the department requests and see if they're meeting any needs that might be covered by this kind of grant program? That's another question I have. So I think it's a very good conversation to have at a future meeting, if that pleases you, Ms. Bates.
I am grateful for that, of course. So I'm not sure how Robert's rules works on this. Should we ask for a resolution at next month's meeting, or?
It would be premature to develop a resolution because simply we need to have that conversation as a committee. You know, if we're going to go in that direction, what are those parameters going to be? And that'll take some time to figure out.
Okay,
We'll have to do some homework. Anyone
Okay.
interested in this, I encourage you to do some homework and bring some good ideas to the table when we get to that conversation.
thank you everyone for that really good conversation. I don't know if anybody else wants to speak up. I have another topic. I'm very interested in the infrastructure bill, the federal infrastructure bill. As I looked that up, it talks about, I mean, if you look on the website, there's pictures, like little cartoons, which I really like because it makes easy reading. But it said no more lead pipes. It said infrastructure, bridges and roads. So I think I asked, is Mr. Phillips here today? I don't.
He is not.
Okay, but so I wanted to ask, I think I asked him to find out from maybe Ernst & Young, what we think we can, have we done this already?
We've communicated to them to look into this.
Okay, because there, it might turn out that some of that 42 million in internal projects, such as Jody's, Ms. Wolnick has proposed a study for water, sustainable water. I can't remember, Drew, wasn't there broadband in, or Mr. Copey is always asking for the broadband out into the farm regions. I'm sure our Mr. Kenyon over here would go along with that. So I think there's important things we have to study there that might come out of that 42 million. And isn't that always the
Yeah,
goal?
and that
to-
is, the intention is to have them look at some other federal programs because we had them look at FEMA previously.
Okay,
And there was a couple of things we were able to take off the list and now we're pursuing FEMA.
all right.
So, yeah, there's a couple federal things that we want them to double check first before we give the final money out. Because if we can get it from another program, then we will. That's more
much-
money for this.
Yeah,
program.
much better. So can we have that on the agenda for our next meeting?
We can give you an update.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
No problem. Okay, unless there is something else that anyone of the
Hand up
committee.
there for Michelle.
Oh, Michelle, did you have something?
Yes, I just wanted to be clear. I don't want this resolution to fail today. I will support this resolution. However, I'm very passionate about this discussion because, I just want to say it again. At no point did I ever anticipate that $4 million would be it. And I think we can all agree that this has to be a very, very important conversation. So thank you.
Mr. Frost?
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on what Michelle said as well as some things Mr. Brown mentioned that, way back when we did the first round of the social issue funding, It was considered, and it was very clear at the time, it was considered sort of a, let's put out some fires and get some money out there quick, and we'll come back and revisit this. Now that we're coming back to revisit it, it seems like it's, has to be fought for, and I think that shouldn't be the case. We did talk about, amounts in that $7 million range. And I'm not saying that's the right number, but there should be no doubt, and I don't know how detailed our minutes are from back then, but there was absolutely no doubt that let's get some money out there, then we'll come back and do a second round. And, we should do that. And it should be clear that that's not something that has to be fought for. It's something that should be done. Thanks.
Mr. Martin?
Whenever it's appropriate, I'll move for the resolution to be passed, and I have a statement in support of that motion.
I'll call on you in just a moment. Did you have one more quick comment, Ms. Bates? before
I
you move on?
believe that the mood, the consensus of this committee is that we should have a second round. So I would really like to move the engine towards, move the gears, however that's
Well,
going
like I
to
said,
happen.
it'll be on an upcoming agenda for us to discuss. So
Okay.
maybe
thank
you and Michelle do some homework in the meantime and bring something back to us. All right. Next on the agenda, under new business, we have a resolution authorizing the adoption of the American Rescue Plan Committee recommended spending plan for state and local fiscal recovery funds distributed to the County of Kane under the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. Mr. Martin, do you move?
I move, yes.
Okay.
I would
Mr.
second.
Kenyon seconds.
I'd like to make one short statement in support of it, and actually it came from Mavis. All of this conversation about has Ernst & Young investigated where we can go and what our alternative funding sources may be, to me, just makes it clearer than it was before. And I thought it was clear before in my mind. We need to be deliberate on how we proceed here, and we need not, and we cannot just, we can't act as fast as perhaps we want to, because there are limited funds. There may very well be alternatives. There may be additional programs that come in, and we're under no immediate pressure to get this. We had a lot of pressure the last time around here that really forced us to act and with some great dispatch. We have time here to do this correctly, and I just want to make sure that we conduct our deliberations all having a full deck of cards in our hand as we begin to think about it. So I support this.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Any other comments on this resolution? Mr. Leonard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two comments. Of the almost $42 million, which I am in support of, I do have two questions about allocations. One was under building management, of which I spoke with Mr. Kenyon to the director and the next in charge about what they needed. And of that $7,821,000, $7 million of that would be to set aside for additional office space or buildings. Mr. Fraz had mentioned that it would be nice if some of this money went into like a seed fund program for future buildings. And I think that would help jumpstart that $10 million that he had suggested by having that $7 million approved under this consideration. The other area I'm not so positive about, and that is under the county health department. We are allocating 25% of our departmental requests, or $10,020,000, to behavioral health initiatives. I don't even know what that is. And I know, Mr. Sanchez, you're chairman of that department and you probably have a good idea, but I don't know how many people on this committee or other board members understand how that money is going to be spent. And I would like a clear definition of how that money is going to be spent.
Well, I can refer you and everyone else in the committee to our SharePoint site, where we have all of the documentation, or have had all of the documentation for the department requests housed. So you can see what they submitted. Michael Isaacson was the lead on that particular program, and there's multiple components to it. I can't get into right now, obviously.
Yes.
But if you refer to those documents, it'll give you quite a bit of information on what's behind that. And part of it is helping create a better infrastructure for mental health services in the county because we don't have a countywide 708 board.
Yes, and Mr. Chairman, I understand that, and I will look at it and get a better definition. Of that $10 million, was there maybe half of that or 40% of that for new initiatives? Maybe 4 million or so.
I couldn't give you the breakdown.
I thought I remembered reading that, but I might be wrong in that. I will get a better definition on that, but I just think $10 million, we on the committee need to know how that's going to be spent. Obviously, if we don't spend it on behavioral health initiatives, there are other needed ways we can do that. But I would just like a better definition on that, but I will be voting to support this resolution today.
Thank you, Ms. Lerner. And I think once approved, we can have department heads come in and present on what these concepts are, if the committee would like at some point, or at least send out a memo to everyone for us to give the Cliff's notes, so to speak.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a great point because in approving this resolution, it doesn't mean we're locking in this money anywhere. We're just saying this is our intention. And I think the intention is important to start with, and then we have to define what the intention is and approve that. So I agree with that procedure.
Ms. Bates.
I also would like to voice my support for this this resolution. I didn't want to mess with it. That's why I didn't amend it today, because I am in support of the resolution.
We appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Mr. Martin.
Do they still have Cliff Notes?
I don't know, but it my mind. It's been a while since I've
There's so
seen it.
little that they had when I was in school that I can't believe they still have Cliff Notes.
The chalkboards then too. We use whiteboards.
Funding for dummies.
On tracks. On tracks.
Hey, I had that too, even when I was in grade school. So any other comments or questions on this resolution for the spending plan? All right, hearing and seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Bates,
Yes.
Brown,
Brown, yes.
Froz,
Yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Molina,
Molina, yes.
Strathman,
Strathman, yes.
Pepe,
Pepe, yes.
Sanchez.
Sanchez, yes. Okay, we have nothing under old business, no need for executive session. Mr. Kenyon, would you like to
I'd
motion
like
to
to
adjourn?
move we adjourn.
Right. Frost seconds, all those